Welcome to our deep dive into the world of memory. We all know that saying about the brain being like a camera, right? Capturing every single detail. But we'll get ready to rethink that because the brain is so much more dynamic and honestly way more creative than we often give it credit for.
It really is fascinating. We tend to get stuck in that idea that our memories are these perfect recordings. But the reality is they're anything but. Our brains are constantly at work building and rebuilding experiences. They weave them together with what we're perceiving right now and even with our imagination.
Okay, hold on a second. You're saying my brain isn't just hitting the record button every time something happens. So then, how are memories actually formed if it's not a video recording what's going on up there?
That's where things get really interesting. Think of it this way. Your brain uses two main ingredients to make memories: dispositions and maps. Now, a disposition is kind of like a recipe, but instead of telling you how to bake a cake, it's a recipe for actions and emotions. It's that deep down knowledge of how to do something, like riding a bike or how you react when you're in a stressful situation.
So it's not like my brain's storing a video of every bike ride I've ever taken. It's more like storing the instructions for how to ride a bike.
Exactly. It's that know-how, the ingrained formula for how to balance and pedal. And from an evolutionary perspective, these dispositions actually came first. Even the simplest organisms needed a way to respond to their environment.
That makes sense. But, we humans are a bit more than simple organisms, right? We've got these complex brains capable of so much more than just those basic instructions. How do those really detailed memories, those sensory-rich experiences actually form?
And that's where the maps come in. As brains evolved, we developed these incredibly detailed maps, representations of our world, places we've been objects, we've encountered the layout of our homes. Just think about your childhood home for a second. You probably remember not just what it looked like, but the sounds, the textures, maybe even specific smells. It's like a full multi-sensory experience.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why a certain song or even a smell can just instantly transport us back to a specific moment. It's triggering these layered maps in our brains. It's not just a snapshot, it's the whole experience coming back to life.
Precisely. And what's truly remarkable is that our brains actually combine both dispositions and maps to create these intricate memories. It's not just what we see, but how we actually interact with what we see,
Hmm.
how we feel about it, and the actions we take. It's all woven together.
This is already blowing my mind, and we're just getting started. So we've got these dispositions and maps working behind the scenes, constantly constructing and reconstructing our memories. But is there like a specific spot in the brain where all this magic happens, like a dedicated memory center, a filing cabinet where it's all neatly stored away?
That's a question that has fascinated neuroscientists for ages. There's this idea of grandmother cells, these hypothetical neurons, each responsible for storing a single memory. The idea was that there might be one neuron for your grandmother's face, another for your childhood pet, and so on.
So like one designated neuron for every single memory we have. But something tells me it's not that straightforward.
You're right. Research, especially with patients who've had brain damage, has shown that memory is way more distributed than that. Damaging one specific neuron doesn't wipe out an entire memory, which tells us that memories aren't locked into single cells, but they're spread across a network of neurons.
So it's less like losing a file from a cabinet and more like the memory is dispersed throughout the entire brain?
Exactly. It's spread out across a massive web of interconnected neurons. And this leads us to a pretty fascinating model for understanding memory recall, the CDZ model.
CDZ. Okay, you've definitely piqued my interest. Tell me more.
CDZ stands for Convergence Divergence Zone. And these zones are thought to be regions in the brain that act like hubs. They bring together information from all our different senses. They're responsible for linking those sensory experiences together into a whole.
Okay, I'm a big fan of real-world examples. Can you give me one to illustrate how these CDZs actually work?
Absolutely. Let's imagine you're watching someone talk. You see their lips moving, and you hear the words they're saying. Two distinct sensory experiences, right? Sight and sound.
Right, but we don't experience them separately. It all comes together as one seamless event.
Exactly. That's the magic of CDZs. They're like central hubs linking the visual experience of seeing lips move with the auditory experience of hearing the words.
So even if I couldn't hear anything, just seeing someone's lips move would still activate those areas in my brain associated with hearing. It's like my brain's anticipating the sound based on that visual cue.
That's the idea. It's similar to how you can hear a song in your head even when there's no music playing. Your brain is reactivating those auditory patterns associated with the song. And that's thanks to these CDZs that link those sensory experiences together.
Wow. So our brains are constantly creating these links between our senses, weaving together this rich tapestry of experiences. So the CDZ model helps explain how we perceive and remember things. But what about when we imagine something? Does that use the same process?
It's remarkably similar. When you imagine something, your brain taps into those same CDZs. To reactivate sensory experiences, it really blurs the lines between real and imagined events.
So if I'm vividly picturing a beach vacation, my brain is essentially bringing back those sights, sounds, even the feeling of sand between my toes, just as if I was actually there.
Precisely. And brain imaging studies show that similar brain regions light up when we're vividly imagining something as when we're actually experiencing it.
So our brains don't necessarily know the difference between a real memory and something we're intensely imagining. That's fascinating, but it also kind of makes you question how reliable our memories actually are. If our brains are always constructing and reconstructing, how much of what we remember is truly accurate?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll definitely dive into deeper. But first, I think it'd be helpful to go back to those concepts of maps and dispositions. We've talked about them, but let's get a clearer picture of how they actually operate in the brain.
I'm all for that. The more we understand about these building blocks of memory, the better we can understand how our minds work, right?
Absolutely. Let's start with maps. They're those detailed representations of the world that are constantly being updated as we gather new information. Take your mental map of your house, for example. The layout where the furniture is, even the colors of the walls.
Right. And if I decide to redecorate or rearrange the furniture, my mental map would update to reflect those changes. It's like my brain is creating a revised blueprint.
Exactly. But dispositions are a bit different. They're more about that know-how, the procedures, those ingrained instructions for how we interact with the world, and even how we feel about those interactions.
So if I think about my morning coffee routine, my disposition for making coffee includes not just knowing how to grind the beans, measure the water, brew it just right, but also how I feel about that first sip in the morning. It's like the anticipation and enjoyment are all part of the recipe.
That's a great example. It's the blueprint for the action, but also for the emotions and experiences that are tied to it. Think back to a concert you really loved. Your disposition helps you relive the energy of the crowd, the feeling of the music pulsing through you, even the distinct smells of the venue. It's all part of that memory.
So dispositions are like the conductor of the memory orchestra, bringing all those different elements together for a truly immersive experience.
I love that analogy. It perfectly captures the way dispositions orchestrate our memories. Now, you might be wondering where in the brain these maps and dispositions actually live. Are they tucked away in separate compartments?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It would make sense if everything was organized like a well-labeled filing system.
Well, if only our brains were that simple. While we know that different regions are involved in processing different types of information, the truth is memory is incredibly complex and interconnected.
Right. It's not like those grandmother cells we talked about, where each memory has its own little designated neuron.
Exactly. The precise location of a memory is more like a sprawling network, a web of interconnected neurons firing in specific patterns.
So it's not a single file, it's a complex pattern of activation across this vast neural network.
Precisely. And this process of constructing and reconstructing memories,
Yeah.
it's happening all the time, whether we're consciously trying to remember something or not. It's a continuous dynamic process.
That's incredible. Even as we go about our day, our brains are busy behind the scenes, weaving together our past experiences with our current perceptions. It's like this ongoing dialogue between what we've lived and what we're experiencing right now.
You've hit the nail on the head. Now, you might be wondering why all of this matters. Why should we even care about these intricate processes of memory formation and recall?
That's a great question. It's fascinating to explore the mechanics of memory, but I'm definitely eager to understand how this knowledge can actually impact our lives. It can't just be a fun intellectual exercise, can it?
Absolutely not. Understanding memory is so much more than just knowing how our brains work. It's about unlocking the power to learn more effectively, to improve our cognitive abilities, and to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our experiences. It's really empowering to realize that we're not stuck with whatever memory we're born with. You can actually train your brain to remember things better.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of strategies are we talking about? Because let's just say my ability to remember where I put my keys could definitely use some work.
Well, let's start with something simple that's often overlooked: attention.
Yeah.
If you're not really paying attention to something, you're less likely to encode it as a strong memory. Think about those times when someone's talking to you, but your mind is miles away. Are you really absorbing what they're saying? Probably not.
Oh, that hits a little too close to home. I'm definitely guilty of that. It's so easy to get distracted these days. But I get your point. No more mindless scrolling when I should be actually engaging with information.
Exactly. Put down the phone, step away from the screens, and really focus on what you're doing. Now, another powerful strategy is repetition. The more you revisit a memory, the stronger those neural connections become. It's like building a mental muscle.
So if I'm studying for an exam, it's not enough to just read the material once. I need to actively quiz myself, explain the concepts to a friend, or find other ways to engage with the information multiple times.
Exactly. Don't just passively absorb the material, actively work with it. And here's another tip. Make connections. Relating new information to something you already know makes it much more meaningful and therefore more memorable. It's like building a bridge between the familiar and the unfamiliar.
So instead of trying to memorize a bunch of random facts, if I can understand the bigger picture, how those facts fit together, I'm more likely to remember them. It's kind of like those memory palace techniques I've heard about, creating those vivid mental images to link information together. Have you ever heard of those?
Absolutely. Those techniques tap into our brain's natural affinity for visual imagery and spatial awareness. And you're right, it's about building a stronger foundation for those memories to hold on to.
I like that. And let's not forget the power of stories. Our brains are wired for narrative. We effortlessly remember the plot of a movie or a book because stories engage our emotions and create this natural flow of information.
You're exactly right. So if you can weave those facts or concepts into a story, even a silly or outlandish one, you'll have a much better chance of remembering them.
This is all such great advice. It's encouraging to know that we can actively train our brains to remember better. It's not just about having a good or bad memory we can take control and make it work for us, but I have a feeling the implications of understanding memory go way beyond just remembering where we left our keys.
You're absolutely right. Understanding memory also has huge implications for research and healthcare. Take Alzheimer's disease, for example. By unraveling the mysteries of memory, researchers are working towards new therapies and interventions that could potentially slow down cognitive decline.
That's incredible. So understanding how memory works at a fundamental level could actually have a real impact on treating some really serious diseases. Are there other areas where this knowledge is being applied?
Definitely. Understanding memory is crucial in fields like law enforcement and the legal system, especially when it comes to eyewitness testimony.
Right, because if memories are these reconstructions, as we've been discussing, they're inherently vulnerable to influence. We've all heard about those cases where eyewitness accounts turn out to be not so reliable, sometimes even leading to wrongful convictions.
Exactly. Factors like stress trauma or even the way questions are asked can unknowingly alter our memories. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of things, so they sometimes fill in the gaps with details that seem plausible even if they weren't actually part of the original experience.
That's a little unsettling. It makes you wonder how much of what we remember is actually true.
It's a valid concern, but it doesn't mean all our memories are unreliable. There are factors that influence the strength and accuracy of a memory. The emotional intensity of an event plays a big role. Highly emotional experiences tend to form more vivid and lasting memories.
So a memory that was really emotionally charged, whether positive or negative, is more likely to be accurate than a more mundane memory.
Generally speaking, yes. The more significant an event is to you, the more likely you are to form a strong, lasting memory of it.
But what about those everyday memories, the less dramatic stuff, the things we need to remember for work or school or just to function in daily life? How can we get better at remembering those things accurately?
That's a great question. Those memory-boosting techniques we talked about earlier, attention, repetition, making connections, and using stories, those are all incredibly valuable for improving everyday memory as well. But to really understand how to leverage those techniques effectively, we need to explore the connection between memory and consciousness.
Okay, now we're getting to the really interesting stuff. I'm ready to dive deeper into that connection. How does memory influence our conscious experience, and how does consciousness in turn shape our memories?
To understand this connection, it's helpful to consider the role of the self in consciousness. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, whose work we talked about earlier, argues that having a sense of self is crucial for consciousness.
Okay, remind me, how does Damasio define consciousness? It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure I fully grasp what it means in a neuroscientific context.
He describes consciousness as a state of mind, where we have knowledge and awareness of our own existence and the existence of our surroundings. It's more than just being awake or having a functioning brain. It requires a mind. And a mind is more than just a collection of neurons firing. It's a system that actively processes information, creates representations of the world, and relates those representations to a sense of self.
So if I'm just reacting to stimuli without any awareness of myself as the one experiencing them, am I truly conscious? It's like that old philosophical question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? But in this case, it's if I experience something but have no awareness of myself as the experiencer, is it truly a conscious experience?
That's a brilliant analogy, and it gets to the core of what Damasio is suggesting. There's a level of self-reflection, a sense of me experiencing this that seems essential for true consciousness.
It seems like he's saying that consciousness isn't just an on-off switch. It's more like a dimmer switch. There are degrees of consciousness.
You're picking up on a key idea. We don't suddenly flip from being unconscious to fully conscious. It's a gradual process, a spectrum of awareness. Think about those mornings where you're technically awake, but your brain still feels foggy, not quite fully engaged. Or those moments when you're so engrossed in an activity that you completely lose track of time.
Like trying to shake off jet lag or brain fog. You're awake, but not really all there yet. Or those times when you're so absorbed in a book or a project that the outside world just fades away.
Precisely. And this leads to some really interesting questions about what it means to be conscious. Consider patients in a vegetative state. They might show some brain activity in response to certain stimuli, but they don't show any behavioral signs of awareness. It's tough to say for sure what, if anything, they're experiencing consciously.
So their brains are doing something, but we can't say for sure whether they're having subjective experiences. It raises all sorts of ethical and philosophical questions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it highlights just how complex and multi-layered consciousness is. So if it's not just about being awake and having a functioning brain, what are those essential ingredients for consciousness?
I'm guessing this is where Damasio's ideas about the self come into play.
You got it. He argues that having a self, a sense of me-ness, is absolutely crucial for consciousness. He illustrates this by discussing a condition called epileptic automatism.
Epileptic automatism. I've never heard of that. What is it?
During an episode of epileptic automatism, the person seems awake, and they might even perform complex actions, but their actions are disconnected, almost robotic, like they're operating on autopilot.
So it's like they're going through the motions without any sense of purpose or intentionality? Like their actions are missing that conscious self directing them?
Exactly. And Damasio suggests that this disconnect really highlights the importance of the self in consciousness. The self acts as this integrative process, linking our actions to our awareness of ourselves as the agents performing those actions.
So in a sense, their actions are fragmented. They're missing that sense of me that usually ties our experiences together into a cohesive narrative. It's like watching a movie where the scenes are all jumbled up and out of order. You can see that things are happening, but it doesn't make sense as a whole.
That's a great way to put it. And this distinction between just being awake, having a mind, and having a self really underscore the complexity of consciousness. They're not just synonyms. They're distinct processes that can be disrupted independently.
This is really making me think about those varying degrees of consciousness we were discussing earlier. If someone with epileptic automatism isn't fully experiencing their actions, does that mean their consciousness is somehow dimmed or reduced during those episodes? Like the dimmer switch has been turned down a notch or two?
It's a very thought-provoking question.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads us to another important aspect of Damasio's work, the idea that consciousness actually exists on a spectrum of intensity and scope.
Okay, so we've established that there are different flavors of consciousness, different levels of awareness, but what exactly do intensity and scope refer to in this context?
Intensity describes how vivid or sharp our conscious experiences are.
Mm.
Think about the difference between those groggy mornings we talked about and those moments when you're laser focused and every detail feels crystal clear. Or think about the difference between a vague memory and a vivid, emotionally charged memory that feels as real as if it were happening right now.
So the intensity of my consciousness can fluctuate depending on my state of mind, my level of alertness, or the nature of what I'm experiencing. That makes sense. But what about scope? How does that factor into our conscious experience?
Scope refers to how much of our mental landscape we're aware of at any given time. Sometimes our awareness is very narrow, focused only on the present moment, what Damasio calls core consciousness. But other times our minds wander. We think about memories, future plans, hypothetical scenarios, complex ideas. That's what he calls extended consciousness.
So it's like the difference between being totally absorbed in a good book, oblivious to everything else going on around you, and then zoning out during a boring lecture lost in daydreams about your upcoming vacation.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Both are states of consciousness, but the scope of our awareness is totally different. And just like intensity, the scope of our consciousness can also shift throughout the day, even from moment to moment.
This is really shifting how I think about my own consciousness. It's not this static thing. It's a dynamic process, constantly changing in intensity and scope. It's like a fluid dance between my inner world and the outside world.
I love that, a fluid dance. And Damasio points out another crucial element in this dance that we haven't really touched on yet, the role of feelings.
Feelings. We often talk about consciousness in terms of thoughts and perceptions, but feelings seem to take a back seat. They're often seen as just a byproduct, a reaction to our experiences, not really central to the experience itself.
Damasio would argue that feelings are far more fundamental to consciousness than we realize. He observed that patients with impaired consciousness often lack emotional expression. Their faces are blank, their voices are flat. They're missing those subtle cues that reveal what's happening internally.
So he's making a connection between this outward expression of emotion and the inner experience of consciousness.
Exactly. And it makes sense when you consider that the brain regions involved in generating emotions are often the same areas affected by conditions that cause loss of consciousness. If those areas aren't functioning properly, we might not be able to experience feelings, even if we're awake and our minds are somewhat active.
So you're saying that feelings aren't just an add-on to consciousness. They're woven into the very fabric of the experience itself.
Precisely. They're a vital part of the experience linking our inner world to the outer world.
It's like feelings give our experiences depth and texture. They color our perceptions and motivate us to act. Without them, our conscious experience would be flat, lacking meaning and urgency.
You've captured it perfectly. Feelings give our experiences weight and significance. They are what make us care about the world and our place in it.
This is all so insightful. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The complexity of perception and the role of the self, this fluctuating nature of consciousness, and now this essential role of feelings. It's like Damasio is painting this incredibly detailed portrait of consciousness with all its nuances and complexities.
He really is. And one of the most thought-provoking ideas that Damasio puts forward is that the self, that sense of me we were talking about, isn't actually a fixed entity.
Wait, really? So it's not like this little mini-me inside my head controlling everything, making all the decisions?
Exactly. It's not like there's this tiny homunculus pulling levers and making decisions.
Yeah.
He argues that the self is a dynamic process constantly being built and rebuilt through our experiences.
So the self is more like an emergent property, a result of all these interactions happening within our brains and between our brains and the world. It's not a static thing. It's a process of becoming.
That's the idea. And if that's true, it raises some pretty fascinating questions.
What kinds of questions? Tell me more.
Well, if our sense of self is always being shaped and reshaped by our experiences, can we consciously influence that process? Can we, in a way, become architects of our own selves?
That's a powerful thought. If the self isn't fixed, if it's a process we can participate in, then maybe we have more agency than we realize. Maybe we can learn to nudge that process, guide it in ways that enhance our well-being, our resilience, even our conscious experience itself.
That's the exciting territory Damasio's work leads us to explore. He doesn't necessarily provide all the answers, but he offers us a framework for understanding these fundamental components of consciousness and how they shape who we are.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like my whole understanding of consciousness has been expanded. It's not just about being awake, it's about having a mind of self and experiencing the world through this rich tapestry of feelings.
And remember, this journey of understanding consciousness is an ongoing process. As you go about your day, pay attention to those subtle shifts in your own awareness. Notice how your attention expands and contracts, how feelings color your perceptions, and how memories shape your understanding of yourself and the world around you. We're all participating in this grand experiment of consciousness.
That's beautifully said, and I think that's a perfect place to pause and reflect on all that we've explored so far. This deep dive has been mind-blowing, to say the least. Okay, I'm still processing everything we've talked about with consciousness, but now I'm curious about the self and its connection to memory. We talked about how the self is this dynamic process, not a fixed entity. But how does memory actually contribute to shaping that ever-evolving self?
That's a great question, and it takes us back to those core concepts of dispositions and maps. Remember, dispositions are like those personalized recipes. for actions, emotions, and even how we experience things. And they're shaped by our past, by all the memories we've gathered throughout our lives.
So my past experiences, my memories are essentially becoming a part of my dispositional repertoire and influencing how I respond to the world and how I feel about things. It's like each memory leaves this imprint on who I am.
Precisely. Each memory, each experience leaves its mark on our dispositional space. It influences how we perceive, act, and even feel in the future. It's like those memories become integrated into us.
That makes a lot of sense. So if our dispositions are built from our memories and our sense of self is intertwined with those dispositions, then wouldn't that mean our memories are, in a way, contributing to the ongoing construction of ourselves?
You got it. Our memories aren't just passive records of the past. They're active agents shaping who we are right now in the present. They inform our beliefs, our values, our sense of identity. They color our perceptions and even influence our choices.
Wow, it's amazing to think about the power of memory. It's not just about remembering facts or events. It's about shaping the very core of who we are.
Exactly. And that's why understanding memory is so important, not just for improving our cognitive skills,
Yeah.
but for understanding ourselves and our place in the world.
This has been such a deep dive. We've gone from the nuts and bolts of how memories are formed to the complexities of consciousness, and now this connection between memory and the self. It feels like we've only scratched the surface, though. There's still so much more to explore.
You're absolutely right. The human mind is this vast and mysterious landscape, and we're just starting to understand its true potential. But every new discovery gives us more tools to harness that potential, to make our lives better, and to shape our own destinies.
That's an incredible thought. It makes me wonder if there are specific things we can do to kind of cultivate a better relationship with our memories, to embrace how powerful they are and shaping our lives in good ways.
Absolutely. There are lots of practices and techniques you can try to improve your memory, to make it easier to remember things, and even learn to deal with memories that might be causing you distress. Mindfulness meditation, for instance, can help you become more aware of your thought patterns and your emotional responses, which can be incredibly useful in working with difficult memories.
That's definitely something I'm going to look into. It's so interesting to think that we can train our minds to work with our memories in a more conscious and deliberate way.
Exactly. And as we keep exploring the human mind, it's important to remember that the self isn't static. It's this dynamic process, always evolving, always becoming. Your memories are a part of that process, shaping who you are at this moment and who you have the potential to become.
This has been an amazing journey. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of memory consciousness, even my own sense of self. Thank you so much for taking me through this fascinating exploration.
It's been my pleasure. Remember, your memories aren't just echoes of the past. They're active forces shaping your present and your future. Embrace their power and keep exploring the incredible abilities of your own mind.
To our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of memory. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep those memories alive, and keep diving deep.